On the program today, longtime activist and labor and human rights attorney Dan Kovalik joins us. His recent book, Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture, is coming out this month, where he reveals the true danger of cancel culture to progressive values and the usefulness of cancel culture by the forces of greed and destruction. He argues that not necessarily for an end to cancel culture, but for a renewed focus on solidarity, compassion, and civility, which of course are all required to build the mass movements we need now more than ever. Dan, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Can you start with your definition of cancel culture and perhaps give us an idea about why you chose to write this particular book at this particular time?
Yeah. So cancel culture, I think generally understood, is a phenomenon in which people, for various reasons, I focus largely on things that people say or write about. They are targeted by others who claim they find certain statements, written or oral, offensive, gang up on that person many times on social media, and in some cases call for that person to be fired or deplatformed or to lose some sort of other status. And the reason what inspired me to write the book was an actual case that I witnessed firsthand here in Pittsburgh. And I think it will illustrate what cancel culture is and, frankly, the problems with it. So, as I mentioned in the book, it was inspired by the cancellation of a longtime peace activist in Pittsburgh named Molly Rush. And she helped co-found 50 years ago one of the longest running peace and justice groups in America, called the Thomas Merton Center. And she's done activism before that, since, including, by the way, on racial justice issues, including trying to open up the construction industry, which had been pretty much the sole place for white workers to work, to open that up to African American workers. In any case, in May of last year, she posted a meme on Facebook that had a picture of Martin Luther King, and it said, "Never rioted, never looted, save the world," or change the world, sorry. And she was immediately attacked on Facebook by hundreds of posts. She then apologized publicly for posting it as insensitive given the moment of the George Floyd protest. But that did not satisfy people. So in response to all this, the board of the Thomas Merton Center, which she helped found, but she's no longer on the board, no longer employed by them, sent out an open letter that they posted on Facebook saying they would no longer work with her because she posted what they called a racist meme. They didn't explain what the meme said or was, and also because she needs to apologize.
Well, that is a right-wing meme. I'm not saying she should lose her job, but that is what they use on Fox News to kind of co-opt the message of Martin Luther King against, people who are hurting today.
And I understand that. I understand that was its origins. She did not know that. I think a lot of people didn't at the time.
Sure.
It seemed pretty innocuous. I think of all the messages one could post, again, it is fairly tame.
You can't, the issue here is that you can't judge a person by one post. Just look back over her, 60, 70 years worth of work that she has done in this area, and that the pile-on attack, the speed of the internet doesn't give you an opportunity to say, oh, wait a minute, actually, this woman has been doing this and maybe she made a mistake. She said she was sorry. She understands the problem, and let's move on from there.
Well, that's right. And what the social media does is, like you said, first of all, it gives you instant ability to pile on someone. It gives you instant rewards for doing so, right? Because you will find many people who will join you in it and like your posts attacking that person. And in many cases, people do it anonymously. You can do it anonymously because you can have profiles without your photo, without your real name. So there's really no risk to you often in doing this. I mean, the other thing, okay, yeah, the origins of it, you're right, was from some right-wing group. Again, she didn't know that. But
it just doesn't take into it just, that whole thing is so disturbing on so many levels. And as a true leftist, I think you can get this, is that a lot of the people who were doing the quote unquote looting were outside actors that came in to make things look terrible.
Yeah. So why not attack, why not question that? And right. I mean, the content of the meme that she posted raised an issue, and that was, should we be glorifying some of the violence that was happening around the protest? And as you say, and as my book mentions, a lot of which was being carried out by young white males, either anarchists who had their own agenda for what they did, or young white males who were right-wingers who were trying to provoke a race war or undermine the Black Lives Matter movement. So the idea that questioning whether, rioting and looting in some circumstances during the protests was appropriate or effective or desirable is a legitimate thing to do. And again, the attacks on her wasn't so much because of the origins of the meme, but because people said, well, you shouldn't be telling African Americans how to liberate themselves. But again, the point is, a lot of the looting and rioting was not being done by the African American community.
See, some of the things you said in the book that were really interesting to me, well, there were many things, but one thing that's sticking out right now is this idea that cancel culture undermines what progressive goals are and hope to be, which is, one of those goals is solidarity with each other, solidarity between workers, solidarity among the oppressed people, just general solidarity. And it seems like the people who are doing the cancel culture have been brainwashed against solidarity. They find their own solidarity in crucifying someone, in this particular case, and not sort of embracing that person and re-educating them in a certain way to where they have fallen into the right-wing talk machine.
Well, exactly. For example, in this case, and in many cases, you have a well-intentioned person who posted something that, again, some people found offensive. A quick phone call or direct message to that person saying, hey, you may want to reconsider this, probably would have done the trick, right? And what you are saying is true. So as an activist, the goal should be, in my view, is to bring as many people into the fold, into the struggle as you can, right? Finding the common ground that we have as, frankly, in the words of the Occupy movement, as the 99%, to go against the 1% who own half the wealth of this country. And you do that by, again, appealing to matters of common ground, by talking to people, allowing people to question things and answering them in a civil way, not shunning them because they don't use the right jargon or whatever. What is happening?
People are super upset. People are just upset. You know how they're putting, a 3-day waiting period before you get your gun, or a gun if you're a gun person. Some states have that. I think we need like a 5-hour waiting period before you tweet, because you have to have a cooler head, but it's very hard to have a cooler head when, your brethren are being shot dead in the street by police officers. I think some of the cancel culture comes from the immediacy of the multiple crises that people who are doing the cancel culture are faced with, and they're exhausted, and they don't find the traditional levers of power responsive enough, and that is what's driving them to feel like, well, I can't really do anything, but I have a tiny bit of power here, and if I mass up and do this kind of false solidarity with the other people who are going to jump on board and tear this person down, I can understand it. I just wish we could stop the stampede and think a little bit deeper. And your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I understand that, but I think, the whole issue, I think, that I try to raise in the book, it is a matter of picking your targets, right?
I was going to ask you about that. What if you canceled? I'm assuming you're against canceling people who also incite violence. Like our former president. You would be against just general any kind of canceling.
Well, I think you have to be careful about that. Because I think that once you go down that road, then it's going to be used against leftists as well. And in fact, as I point out,
it's already been, they've been murdering union bosses for centuries. It's not like they when they cancel, they really cancel.
Well,
we're just like,
it's true.
We're like, Karen should be fired from her job at the bank because she, whatever that thing.
Yeah. But the weird thing is you now have leftists who, in the name of social justice, are calling for Karen to get fired from the bank because she said something wrong. They're uniting with the bosses against a fellow worker. Right? That is bizarre. And that is what is people are being patted on the back for doing that. They think that is progressive. They think going after a professor, many of whom now are adjuncts who get paid next to nothing and who have no tenure, no job security, asking for
no health insurance.
Right.
No.
And I'm an adjunct, so I know this firsthand.
I am also an adjunct. In fact, that was where I was going to go with this afterwards. Yes.
Calling for someone like that to get fired again because you disagree with something they honestly say and in the context of the academy, that's not activism. That is not the target. But again, I think people are confused and they go after the low-hanging fruit, as you say, maybe because they're angry and they have legitimate reason to be angry about what's happening. But if you go after the wrong targets, after people who should be your allies and could be your allies, you've shot yourself in the foot and you've shot the movement in the foot. And I think you see that quite a bit. Instead of, as a good organizer, trying to bring as many people into the tent as possible to create a big movement, in fact, the idea of cancel culture is to throw as many people as you can out of the tent so you can feel morally superior and better about yourself. That is not activism, right? There's a Freudian term for this called the narcissism of small differences, which captures this idea that when you have like tribal groups in a society, again, in order to feel part of my group, whatever that is, I need to out certain people over small matters to feel, again, to reaffirm my identity or whatever. But that's not that. Again, that isn't progressive. That isn't activism. That's
it's mental illness. What it is.
Yeah.
Really, it's not. The idea of losing your ego from the '60s and sinking into a oneness with all beings. That is not this.
No, it's not. And that's why I wrote the book. I just think people need to step back. And again, I'm not, I don't have a panic about this. I don't think this is the greatest national concern we have, like some people, some of the people on the right claim. But it's a serious issue that we have to recognize, right? And we can't deny that it exists. A lot of people say, well, it doesn't really exist. Of course it exists. We see it every day. All of us know of someone that's
or are someone. Let's say, for example,
what's that?
I fit a lot of these categories. I'm a comedian. I'm a political comedian. I'm a professor, an adjunct professor, and I'm just a person in a multiracial business here, online content production, and occasionally, you misstep, but not out of malice.
Right, and that's the point, and again, like in this letter that the board of the Thomas Merton Center wrote, they said something which, again, I think captures, the sentiment behind the cancel culture. And they say that intention doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so you treat the white supremacist who's part of the Klan the same way you treat the progressive person who misspeaks, as if they're the same thing, because
Right.
intention doesn't matter. Of course, intention matters.
Yeah.
And again, when we say it doesn't matter, and that if you just say the wrong thing out of ignorance, out of inadvertence, out of error, again, that is not a reason to turn your back on someone or to try to get them fired.
I don't think it's actually natural. And as we're talking about this, it certainly serves, it certainly serves the forces of oppression. Why don't you talk about, I know you've talked about this in the whole book. Talk about why corporate America loves cancel culture.
Yeah, because they can now go after people they don't like. Workers, for example, who try to organize, who again may say something wrong or take the position that is deemed wrong or unwoke or whatnot. And I give this example that under the Trump administration, the National Labor Relations Board, the worst board we've ever had, and I can say that out of being a labor lawyer for 26 years, they overturned years of board law which had protected the speech of workers engaged in union activity and strikes, collective bargaining. The idea was, in those instances, you may say things that are offensive, even racially tinged, but you shouldn't be fired when you say those things in the heat of the moment. We're going to give you a certain leeway as long as the speech you're making isn't threatening in a real way towards people. The Trump board overturned that legal holding of the board, which stood for many years, in a case where an African-American employee, during collective bargaining, amongst other things, in trying to make a point that the company was trying to impose draconian workplace conditions on the workers, pretended to be a slave and said, "Yes, master." He was disciplined for this. The company was offended by his
they were offended by his
self-deprecating words, and the board upheld the discipline of this guy.
Wait, so this is why it's bullshit.
Yeah, not because the Trump board was so woke, right? Or liked unions or liked African-American employees. No, because it was an excuse.
Yeah, because then the spotlight goes to this guy made this reference to slavery. And they forget that they're not getting bathroom breaks and they have to wear ankle monitors while they're running back and forth in the Amazon warehouse.
Yeah. So again, what happened is the Trump board kind of seized the moment and the sentiment of the day. Where people on the left are happy to cancel someone for doing that, to change board law in a way that's going to hurt workers. And my guess is under Biden, that will not be reversed. My guess is that is going to be the law. And hilariously, and I quote this in the book, you can't even believe these people said it with a straight face. General Motors was the company involved in the case. One of their spokesmen was interviewed, I think in the New York Times, or one of the big papers, saying, "Yeah, we're very proud of this decision because we really have a zero tolerance for this sort of thing." And they tried to claim, that they were all progressive. And this is nonsense, right? This is absolute nonsense. But this is how those things are being used, and people need to, be aware of that and alert to that.
So many people on the left of the political spectrum are excited about the new round of censorship that these corporate giants like Facebook and Google, as you say, are putting on people on the right. They're mistaking, as you put it in your book, allies. They're mistaking these big corporations for allies of the left because they silence the right. Can you talk a little bit more? Give me an example of that. I'm on the left and everyone I know hates Amazon, hates Facebook, hates them all. They're not too thrilled about it, but some are kind of happy that Twitter threw President Trump off at the end of the screed there at the end of the run.
Yeah, and threw other people like him off. And also, you had that. Does anyone remember Parler? Probably not, because it's gone now, basically. They deplatformed this alternative social media platform that, again, we may not like. But the point is, this is contracting speech.
I don't know. Dan, these people are getting on there plotting revenge, and they're plotting killing of even politicians I didn't like so much. They're can't that be seen as if they were out in the coffee shop like they used to be when you would be plotting and overthrow the government before not that I would be there, but before the internet, the cops would bug the shop and then they would come and get you all.
But you wouldn't ban coffee shops because of that, or drinking coffee, or if they were doing it through the mail, you wouldn't ban the mail service. In fact, it's kind of good that they were doing it on Parler, where people could actually monitor it and get ahead of them. Like, you should want people to do that in the open, not do it. God knows where they're doing it now, but you don't destroy a whole means of communication because people do that. People do that on Facebook too, and Twitter. I mean, I think that, again, on some close examination, you see that this is not necessarily to our benefit as progressives, that these things happen. And again, the studies show that the social media outlets censor the left more than they do the right.
Exactly. They've been doing this to the left forever, burning down the newspaper, place for the leftist papers, for all of this stuff. So I guess it was bad when they did it to the left. It's still, I guess, it definitely was bad when they did it to the left. So it's either, there doesn't seem to be a third option. But it does seem a slight comeuppance that it's actually happening to the right now.
Yeah, and I guess, I understand that people feel a certain, happiness about that.
I think that personally, taking Trump off Twitter, no one agrees with me. So I'm just assuming we're not going to find a common ground. But I think that Trump on Twitter was like adding, chemicals to a fire that was really burning and raging. So for a while, you got to take the chemical off the fire. And it did seem to have a slight dampening effect. So I don't know.
Possibly. Though, again, you have a guy, I don't like in Trump. You had 74 million people vote for the guy. The idea of saying that he can't publicly speak is a little problematic.
He had all the TV networks. He could just go on TV.
Yeah, but they ignored him. Now, I mean, he did for 4 years. I mean,
and that's so why aren't they mad? Why isn't everybody mad that Fox didn't have him on and was ignoring him? But they're mad that Twitter wanted to not have him on and ignore him there. Why isn't everyone mad at these other outlets who are like, I don't think we're going to do Trump right now because it's a bit much?
Yeah, well, but for years they did. The truth is the media created him. The CNN created him more than Fox did. I mean, all these media companies made billions of dollars on Donald J. Trump. And then they pretend that they give a shit as he's leaving office, that he caused a problem. And of course, now they don't, the viewership has gone down.
But it's so crazy because we're just mad at these media outlets, and I'll put Twitter in bed with CNN for creating him. And then when Twitter says, we're not going to create it, we're going to step back on this, everyone on the left goes totally nuts. Like, it's censorship. Well, it's more complicated than that.
Well, I agree with that. But at the same time, I think a lot of people on the left also applauded it. Like you didn't have, a huge reaction to that. The one issue that probably the most censored issue is that of people defending Palestinian rights, for example. And people are censored all the time for that on social media and other platforms. I saw Angela Davis, for example, was just uninvited to speak because of her views on Palestinians. Again, when you give that kind of power to people to do that, they're going to use it for ways that we don't like, and we,
Dan, yes, it's a complicated thing here, this cancel culture. In addition to this book that we're talking about now, which is called Cancel This Book, what a great title. You have written other books, No More War, as well as books on Iran and Venezuela. Do you see a connection between war, imperialism, and cancel culture?
Well, I do. I mean, I try to draw that link in the book. I think it's a complicated one, but first of all, in the case, if I go back to Molly Rush, you saw her canceled. Here's this peace, activist who was canceled after many years of peace activism for this meme she wrote. And as I postulate in the book, I think part of why it was so easy to cancel her is because the left has more or less embraced war, certainly doesn't care much about it. Like the fact that she was a peace activist didn't give her any leg to stand on in the current leftist milieu. I mean, because part of the thing that's happening is instead of fighting, for example, to stop the war in Yemen, where literally millions of people are dying, literally millions, okay? This is one of the greatest human created catastrophes in modern history. Okay. There's very little said about it. There's almost no protest about it. Instead, people are, busy trying to, knock down a monument or again, cancel some professor. This is a distraction from the real things that are happening. It's not real activism. There are real life and death things happening, which are being overlooked. Because again, I think people are mistaking, fighting amongst themselves with real activism. And so that's where I think a lot of this comes. And again, I think there's this idea that, as long as we diversify the White House and the military, that somehow that's going to take care of everything, even while that diverse military and White House is carrying out atrocities around the world. And, people lose the forest for the trees, I think, in all this discussion.
Yeah, I do think is there any evidence that this cancel culture has been sort of inflamed by some of the same actors that come out and make protests look like they're violent when they're not?
Oh, you mean that those people are trying to gin up cancel culture? I don't know about that particularly. I wouldn't be surprised.
It serves the corporate agenda. It serves the corporate agenda. It serves the pitting people against each other is in the playbook for keeping everybody confused so that the 1% can take advantage of everybody. That you would think that they would, have some role in continuing to support cancel culture.
Well, they certainly are happy that it exists. They are happy that working people are attacking other working people. They drape themselves in the mantle of progressive things like the Black Lives Matter movement, and then turn around and oppress workers. And it works for them. Probably the classic case that I mentioned in the book is Uber, which, ran a campaign in California, again, draped itself as a supporter of Black Lives Matter, to get a referendum passed so that its employees would not be considered employees under the law and therefore be able to organize and get certain benefits that the law provides. And that worked for them. So you had people who voted for Biden in huge numbers also vote for this pro-Uber referendum. And people are being fooled by that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So much to discuss. The book is coming out. It's not even out yet. You have to wait a couple of days.
April 27th. Yes.
How exciting. How exciting. Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. Dan Kovalik is the author. He's also the author of the critically acclaimed The Plot to Scapegoat Russia, among others. Dan, thanks so much for being on the program today. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Julianna. Thank you.
You're watching Act TV. Stay with us.